Yo, yo, yo. I told y'all guys I would hit y'all with the presentation, man. So we got it up here, man. We got it right here. Man's journey to self-mastery towards your 2.0, your best self that is aligned across the mental, the physical, the spiritual, mind, body, soul, thoughts, actions, and beliefs, baby. But yeah, dude, this was honestly super fun to make. I'm not gonna lie, first ever like presentation, educational style video. So we're about to rip it, baby. Let's go. Let's get straight into it. So this is a bit of a preface slash overview of what we're gonna be covering. So a few months back, I essentially developed my own idea of the journey that, I see that is so prevalent within, people that have experienced life in a similar fashion as I have. And of course, experiencing this firsthand, it made me realize that there really is this generalized fashion that people go through as they begin to pursue the best version of themselves and overall life they desire. And so the journey is as follows, right? I like to conceptualize it as like a pyramid where obviously I got the steps right here. It starts off in the misaligned physical, it goes up to the misaligned mental, it peaks at the spiritual, what I consider to be the second life, right? Which, we'll dive into that, right? Hold your horses. And then from there, once you reach that spiritual point, once you experience that second life, man, then it goes down to the aligned mental, and then from there, the aligned physical, right? So I'm telling you guys, this is the journey. This is genuinely what it takes, in my humble opinion, and with all the subjective experience that has defined my journey thus far over the past, 1.5 years, this is genuinely how it is. This is the path towards becoming your best self. But let's dive straight into it, man. First of all, the misaligned physical. This is the default state we all enter this world from, right? When you think about it, when you are born, your mind isn't fully developed, right? Think about kids. They just live life essentially aimlessly, right? Carefree. They're just doing whatever they want. And that's essentially what being misaligned physically is. It's kind of, you're just living, or you're just going through your day to day, doing the same old habits, not really aware or conscious of how your thoughts, how the mind, how your spirit is influencing just how you operate on a regular basis. And so as a result, instead, you're operating from purely a physical lens, which means you're fixating heavily on material possessions and your fleshly desires above all else, right? And another thing is action, right? Part of the physical, right? Within the thoughts, actions, beliefs thing, aligning those three things, action is directly correlated with the physical plane. But the thing is, as thoughts and beliefs come into the equation as well. But when you're purely operating on a physical lens, you just think action is the one size fits all solution to any of your problems, right? You just think hard work and effort and just working towards your goals in whatever way you see fit through just conscious physical effort, you think that is how things get done. But as we'll see, it's certainly not. And so most people never transcend this point. And it's why they allow their desires to be just that, unfulfilled desires, right? Just think about how many, it's crazy because you think about how many people are on their deathbed and they just have regrets for the life they live. And it's because more often than not, they essentially went through their whole lives operating within this misaligned physical realm. They never even got to reach the mental, and even then, they would still be misaligned mentally. But it's just crazy to think that this is where 99% of people are within, like, genuinely within this life. They just continue to operate within this realm. And the way I explain it is that this is the phase where you just autopilot a life misaligned from the one you want to live, where it just feels like you're constantly chasing what the life you desire, that version of you. It's like you have a vague idea of it, but you just simply don't know how to actually move and step towards that. And so these two pictures on the right, man, this was from late 2023, right? This was me late 2023, and I would say this was before I even embarked on this, whole personal development journey. This is how I was living, right? I was hitting the gym. At this point, I'd been going to the gym for about a little less than 2 years, so maybe like 1.5 years. And it's like I'm not in terrible shape, but for like just looking at myself, I can just tell that I wasn't living, a fulfilling life. I wasn't truly fulfilled, right? And the picture below this, it ties well into this, in that when you are operating from a misaligned physical perspective, it's like you just allow your flesh to dictate. I'm going to use fitness as an example, for throughout this little journey that I've outlined, and that this is what it looks like to be misaligned on a physical level in terms of just within the gym, within your fitness, right? At this point, I had been trying to like bulk up because, if you're anything like me, man, I started at the gym. I was like 120 pounds, right? I've always been a naturally skinny guy, and so I was like, you know what? Let me bulk up. Let me put on some size. And as a result, I figured the only way to do that was to just eat more. I was purely thinking from an action thing of like, oh, I just have to eat more, and that's all there is to it. And so this is the type of stuff I would be eating like clockwork, bro, just smashing some Chick-fil-A, Chipotle, bro. For breakfast, I'd really be having like donuts, Pop-Tarts, like this is genuinely what it looks like to be operating from this misaligned physical perspective, right? And I was just autopiloting this. I genuinely had zero intention or awareness that I was just working myself towards, an unfulfilling cause, right? Because truthfully, this is genuinely the opposite of how I want to look and feel, right? Even back then, it's like I knew I could get into such phenomenal shape, but I was just operating from such a wrong lens, from a weak foundation, misaligned from what I actually wanted. And so once you graduate from this level, right, we get to the misaligned mental. And at a certain point in time, you begin to acknowledge the power of the mind. And you acknowledge that life is more than physical reality. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought? But you begin to understand that your thoughts play a huge role within shaping this reality. And so mental models, frameworks, they become more digestible. You begin to understand and pick up on these things more and more within your life. Things such as discipline, confidence, self-image, just overall mental health, how your thoughts just influence the way you move within your day to day. But the problem with this is that once you begin to understand the power of the mind, because of the fact you've been operating from such a physical perspective, just leaning on your fleshly desires, focusing on material possessions, like the money, the status, just getting hoes, girls, whatever it might be, then it's like you begin to understand the power of the mind, but then you get hooked on that because all you'd ever known was just this misaligned physical. So now you think like, holy, this is it. It's the mental. It's all the mind, right? You start to believe that the mind is then the solution to all your problems. And instead of action, you believe just influencing your thoughts is what needs to be done. And so this leads to an over reliance on logic and the ego to get things done. And as a result, dude, I'm telling you guys. So this is the part where so many people that are on like personal development, this is the part they're stuck in, right? And it just takes one shift to change everything. Because, and this was something I struggled with so much, where I would start doing these things. I would start excessively disciplining myself, telling myself I needed to, do X, do Y in order to get the result I wanted. Right? You become obsessed with acquiring knowledge. You just go down this, the self-improvement rabbit hole of content, of just you're relying on the how-to videos to build your mindset, to guide your ability to succeed. You just fall into this trap of believing that, if I just consume more and more knowledge, if I just acquire more and more knowledge, that I will live the life I want to live. I will become my 2.0, the best version of me, right? And this is why this phase defines most people who engage in the traditional self-improvement space within the prescriptive soulless lens, because that is what truly, that's what self-improvement, personal development, whatever you want to call it, that's what it's come down to. It's just a bunch of people marketing their own agendas, their own ideals onto you and telling you that, oh, this is how you need to do things, right? And as a result, you lack the ability to truly think from a place of authenticity and individuality. So it's like, even though you've ascended from the physical and now into the mental, and understanding how powerful, your thoughts and just obtaining knowledge and cultivating a strong, powerful mindset, right, within things such as discipline, confidence, self-image, you're still lacking the ability to base it off of a foundation that is truly of you, that is authentic, that is truly representative of who you are individually. And so, as I'm as I said, I'm gonna relate it to the fitness, bro. This is where the science-based lifting comes into play, man. This is what plagues so many people, and this is how I was, right? When I first started into the gym, I didn't know what to do, right? For honestly, for the yeah, I'll provide a bit of backstory, but when I first started in the gym, I was doing like powerlifting style training, where I was deadlifting, I was benching, I was squatting. But then as I got deeper and deeper within, just becoming more enthralled within the process of just hitting the gym, building muscle, all of that, I started to integrate myself more within the fitness culture, the gym culture, especially in the online space. And as a result, I started diving so deep into the whole science-based, lifting rabbit hole, in terms of like, oh, you gotta train a failure, you gotta train, this RIR, reps in reserve, fatigue management. You gotta do these are the best exercises in order to, build X muscle group, right? I was diving so deep into this, this type of content genuinely. Right? This is the type of stuff that I was consuming like clockwork. And the same way I was consuming, Chick-fil-A and all that, BS food like clockwork within the misalignment physical. Now I'm consuming all this BS content within the misaligned mental, because I'm still operating from that misaligned state. And so if you're anything like how I was, and this is you consume this type of content on a regular basis, man. And it's not to say that the people that provide, like for example, like Andrew Huberman, Dr. Mike, Jeff Nibbert, all of these, I respect these guys. Don't get me wrong. I respect these guys. I believe the information they put out is, of value. But the thing is that when you're in this stage, it's you take everything at face value, right? You become over reliant and obsessed with this type of information, to the point where it's like you're just so desperate to get it. And so as a result, you don't properly know how to integrate it and apply it from a authentic individual foundation. And so this leads over into what I would describe this state to be in one picture. And I know so many people can resonate with this, right? Where it's like, when you are in this stage, this is genuinely how life feels. Or, even just from a purely mental, internal, thinking perspective, bro, this is genuinely how it feels because you just don't know what is right. You don't know what's wrong. You're constantly in pursuit of knowledge. There's so many things going on in your head. And as a result, it just leads to this mental burnout, this mental fatigue when you're operating from this perspective for so long of just consuming all this type of content, telling forcing and disciplining yourself unnecessarily, right? It's not it. Do you want to live like this? Because I sure don't. And I was tired of feeling like this 24/7 where it just felt my thoughts were all over the place. And it wasn't until, boys, bro, it wasn't until I reached this point. Okay, I know what we're thinking with the picture, right? The picture is a bit over the top, but this was the best thing I could find to at least conceptualize what it feels like to reach this spiritual point. Obviously, this is not how it feels like in real life, or at least not how it looks like, right? You don't just, all the colors, and you don't teleport into space and all of a sudden you open your eyes and you're just this enlightened being now, right? But reaching the spiritual, man, this is the pinnacle and climax of any truly transformative experience one will undergo within their lifetime. Because reaching this point signals a transcendence beyond the mind, right? You graduate from this misaligned mental state and you now are intentional and aware of the power of your inner being and nature, right? Which is the heart, the soul, the spirit. This is what matters. This is the foundation that needs to be built off of if you want to achieve anything worthwhile and authentic to who you are within this life. And so you begin gaining clarity on who you are, your own story, and overall the things you actually want within this life, not what, from watching all those self-help, science-based fitness videos, whatever it might be, not all these people telling you you have to do this, telling you you have to do that. And as a result, your mind and your thoughts being slowly but surely conditioned to that type of content and thus operating from a place of dependency on how other people tell you to live life, you begin actually operating from authenticity and an internalization of your power over everything else in your life. Right? You begin to adopt this new way of doing things. You graduate from relying on knowledge and the mental models within the misaligned mental phase, and you instead lean on emotions, your feelings, and above all else, intuition. Right? Intuition is such a powerful thing, man. Honestly, might make a whole separate thing on that because your intuition, once you nail this spiritual thing, once you nail that, dude, the intuition will just guide you to wherever you want to go. And so, simply put, you just become self-sufficient and independent within your own capability to alter reality how you see fit. As I mentioned, you don't have to rely or depend on anybody else. You have the capability to make things happen yourself. You don't need to rely on the external factors, man. And so this is why I consider it the second life, because when you reach this point, then you begin operating. This is the catalyst for operating from an aligned perspective, right? This is the catalyst. This is when life actually starts. This is when you actually start living a life, completely tied to who you are fundamentally. That is the most important thing within 2.0 is that we want to become successful, but we want to become successful in an authentic manner because success by itself, it's not enough, right? You can achieve the physique, you can get the money and still feel empty about it because it wasn't achieved authentically. Once you understand that spirituality is the foundation of everything in life, it all starts on the spiritual, man. No debate, no question asked, right? It all starts on the spiritual, and that it is the only catalyst for stepping into the authentic success you desire. It is the highest ROI thing. It is the biggest lever to be pulling if you want to achieve the success you desire. If you want to step into that version of you that has everything you desire, right? It all comes from embracing this second life, from finally reaching the spiritual. And as I mentioned, obviously The picture is a bit over the top, but this is genuinely how it feels, right? When you are operating on the stage, like I said, this might not be how it looks, but you'll just be moving through life, with such conviction, with such relaxation, with such security. Like your thoughts and your actions will all come downhill. And, that perfectly segues into the aligned mental and physical. And the reason I combine these two is because once you double down on your own spiritual being and who you are in such a visceral, fundamental level, everything you want in this life comes downhill within the mental and the physical. Because when you become so clear on who you are and what you desire out of life, your thoughts and your actions begin to reflect that effortlessly, right? Within the mental, your mind becomes fixated purely on thinking from the lens of being that version of you, living that life that you're striving to achieve. And you just simply feel your way towards that versus relying on logic and knowledge, right? It's not to say logic and knowledge are, evil, but you begin to rely so much more on your feeling, just feeling your way through life. And as a result, resonation becomes more important than information. I'm telling you, this is this is something that I've been really reinforcing within myself, within the content I consume, and that it's not about the information, it's about whether or not what is being presented to me actually resonates with my authentic inner being, right? That is the most important thing. And then from there, within the physical, bro, your physical reality materializes and becomes an expression of the aligned mental state you achieve from the foundation of your spiritual being, right? It all comes downhill. You get the material things you want, you get the success you want without even trying to, effortlessly, because you begin operating from a spiritual foundation, from the only foundation that is able to facilitate everything you want in this life. And that is just, it all comes from here. It comes from the soul. It comes from the spirit. It comes from the heart. And so these phases reinforce the level of material success and internal fulfillment that is obtained from doubling down on who you are and realigning your thoughts and actions towards that wholeheartedly. This is when alignment across mind, body, and soul is achieved, right? Thoughts, action, beliefs as well. This is what it truly comes down to. This is the perfect representation of 2.0, right? Alignment across the mental, the physical, and the spiritual. And as a result, you will just naturally step into the life you want to live, man. And these three pictures right here, and by all means, I am not saying I am, this completely aligned individual, but I've reached the spiritual point in my own experience. I believe I've reached a point where I am beginning to understand my own foundation, my own spiritual being, so much to the point where I'm beginning to see that the mental and the physical things are beginning to catch up to that, right? They're catching up to this embodiment within my daily life of just who I am, right? And so within, this is what I would consider the more of the mental side, and that I was able to start a YouTube channel because for so long I had been desiring and wanting to, get into content creation, man. But I never could because I was operating from that misaligned mental state. And it wasn't until I really began to understand how powerful spirituality is, how powerful and necessary it is to know thyself, that it just became so much easier for me to then commit to starting this channel and finally documenting my own journey and, revealing all the things that I've learned within it, and obviously that I will continue to learn as I gain more and more clarity on who I am, because it's truly a lifelong journey, right? It truly is a lifelong journey. And as you guys saw earlier, how I was slamming Chick-fil-A's, Chipotle, all the BS food, man. This is my diet now, right? My diet, I would say this is more of the body, the physical aspect. and that my diet is absolutely locked in now, right? I actually eat not out of, just fleshly desire and for pleasure, but I actually feed myself to fuel, to nourish, right? We got some eggs here, some kiwi, right? A whole yogurt bowl with some organic granola, some blueberries, some raw cacao nibs. Like, dude, this is what being physically aligned looks like. You start to treat your body with the respect that it deserves, right? You're not feeding it some BS, some processed food, right? You're giving it the raw, the natural stuff, right? That is what it's all about, bro. Like, truly dialing in my diet has been one of the best changes so far within just my overall health journey. And that for so long I was just focusing on the training, but it wasn't until I really started to dial in my diet where I just felt so much better and so much more aligned to the version of myself that I wanted to become. And so this picture right here is me, in this current within this current time of my life, right? Looking back here, this was me about 1.5 years ago. Yeah, a little less than 2 years ago. This was me, and now this is how I'm living, right? This is how I look. This is how I'm living, and obviously, even outside of just the physical appearance, because I would say I definitely look way, way better. But in terms of just the fulfillment, in terms of the mindset, the thoughts, just the beliefs I have about myself, the conviction that I've obtained, all of the knowledge and insights that I've extracted from my own journey, and just understanding myself on such a visceral level. I've just gotten to the point where life has just become it's become a celebration, right? Every day feels like a celebration for the most part. Obviously, it's not perfect, but I can tell you, I just feel so much more fulfilled within everything that I'm doing on a regular basis now compared to who I was within that picture that you guys saw. And obviously, this was a picture of me fucking rucking with a, I threw like a 20-pound dumbbell in this backpack. And I was probably listening to like a podcast or something, because genuinely, this is the type of stuff that fulfills me. I just love going outside shirtless, just being active, living that type of lifestyle instead of just, being stuck in my head so much, right? As you guys have seen within the misaligned physical and mental. And that, my friends, that is the overarching journey we are all on. All right, when it comes to pursuing that version of you, your best self, your 2.0, right? From my experience, that is it. That is the journey. And obviously, I think I mentioned this earlier. It seems that majority of the people who may watch this are stuck in the soulless self-help space that defines the misaligned mental, because obviously, as I mentioned, I feel like so many people never reach the point in which they understand how powerful the mind and your thoughts play a role in shaping your reality. But I feel like, once I really dove into self-improvement, personal development, got into the self-help space, as I wrote here, that is when I began to understand the power of the mind. And so I could imagine anybody who's watching this, it's like you're sort of in that boat, or you've maybe even passed that boat of being in that misaligned mental phase where you're just so enthralled within just self-improvement and just consuming all the content and wanting to obtain all this knowledge to build your mindset, right? But this is your sign to graduate from self improvement and start walking the path of authentic self mastery, right? Where you upgrade to the spiritual, you begin to turn within instead of turning to the external world to help you become that version of you. And so, regardless, the true beginning of any transformation starts with embracing our spiritual and authentic nature within the climax of this journey, as outlined above. Because once you reach that peak, the mental and the physical, it all comes downhill because now you are aligned, right? It's simply a matter now of doubling down on who you are, obtaining such a deep understanding of thyself. Know thyself. That to me is a mantra that perfectly encapsulates what it takes to really just achieve anything in this life that is tied to who you are fundamentally. And once you do that, you begin to align 100% of your mental energy towards that. And if you do it for long enough, the physical results materialize. And then they speak for themselves as to the power of 2.0 alignment, right? Alignment across the mind, the body, and the heart slash soul. That is it, boys. The journey towards self mastery, the journey towards your 2.0. It all starts on the physical, goes up to the mental, you reach the spiritual, and from there it all comes downhill. But the thing is, you start off misaligned, and it takes you getting to that spiritual point where you experience that second life, and thus you begin to operate finally for the first time in your life from an aligned perspective. And as a result, the life that you want to live, everything that you desire begins to materialize effortlessly, man. And it truly is what I'm so passionate about within just wanting to help other people understand and realize this within their own journey and experience of life, in helping them to achieve authentic success. Because success by itself isn't enough, right? Authentic success is what we are actually chasing for, whether we realize it or not. And so long as you commit yourself to this journey, wherever if you're on the misaligned physical, getting to the misaligned mental and then to the spiritual, once you complete this first half, man, the second half is effortless. It's simply a matter of just, as I wrote here, where you're autopiloting a misaligned life. It just becomes a game of autopiloting an aligned life, man. But yeah, boys, super, super grateful I got this out. First ever presentation in the books. Absolutely phenomenal. Definitely gonna do more of these for sure. Definitely gonna do more of these for sure. But hey, you guys got value from that, drop a like. If this resonates with you, if you're trying to figure out how to align yourself better across the mental, the physical, the spiritual, to step into the version of you that you want to become, man, this is the channel for you. Right? This is the channel for you. But yeah, boys, till then, see y'all in the next one.